lot of unexpected news on this edition of Dolphins Today by Chat Sports, presented by Prize Picks. Le'Veon Moss retired yesterday from the NFL UDFA this year. Want to talk more about that and why that was the case. Assistant GM Kyle Smith, is he already leaving the Miami Dolphins? Plus, with the schedule release coming tomorrow, no international game for the Dolphins despite heavily rumored to be playing in Mexico City. We're going to start with the retired player, Le'Veon Moss, the Texas A&M running back, who was one of the best UDFAs the Dolphins signed, in my opinion. They gave him more than $250,000 guaranteed in undrafted free agency, which signals they had high hopes for him, because anything above $250K guaranteed for UDFA is priority money. And you could understand why, right? Like, he was really good at A&M. The issue was he just was never able to actually stay on the field, and that is what caused him to go undrafted. But the tape, the production, all screams, all right, this guy can, if he stays on the football field, be a dynamic player in your backfield. And I said multiple times that I thought he could easily push either Ollie Gordon or Jalen Wright for that RB3 spot on this Dolphins depth chart. But the injuries just caught up to him. Last year, he only played in 7 games. Why? Missed the final 6 due to an ankle injury. So he missed a lot of time there. In 2024, he played 9 games, missed the final 4 or 5 games. Why? Well, he tore his ACL and MCL. In the year prior, in 2023, he missed 4 games due to a hamstring injury. So that is 3 substantial injuries, right? An ankle injury that caused 6 games missed, an ACL, MCL tear, and a hamstring injury. To me, this entire decision for him to retire all stems to his body just maybe breaking down. And unfortunately, some people just aren't built out to handle the grind week in, week out, and on the daily in terms of contact, recovery. The body just can't handle it for all people. That's why the guys that can, they're world-class athletes. So with him off the roster, DJ Herman took his spot. He'll be that fullback, special teams, linebacker, jack of all trades in OTAs, minicamp, and training camp this upcoming summer. And now I just would have to assume Miami keeps 3 running backs on the 53-man roster, and it's going to be Achane, Gordon, and Wright, because I don't really see Edwards or Hankerson pushing any of those 3 guys. This is why you subscribe to the channel, though, because we'll have you covered with daily Dolphins content no matter what the news actually is. Hit that sub button right now, 60 away from 83.2K. The other news for Miami, how about this? Assistant GM Kyle Smith is getting an interview with the Minnesota Vikings for their general manager job. If you remember, they actually installed an interim GM after they moved on from Kwesi after the 2025 season, and they did not officially hire anyone yet. So they're kind of going through that process now. Now, the reason why this is so unexpected, not because Kyle Smith isn't worthy of consideration to be a GM in the NFL, but he just joined the Miami Dolphins organization in January, the 23rd to be exact. So it would be quite the turnaround for Smith to get the assistant GM job in Miami in late January and get a full-time GM role in May. That'd be unheard of. But you might not be aware of who Kyle Smith is, so let's fill you in. 41-year-old guy, so rising member in front offices. Played wide receiver at Youngstown State, actually got a couple years in the NFL before playing in the Canadian Football League. He began his NFL executive career as a scout with Washington in 2010. Spent the last 4 years in Atlanta with 2 different roles. Moved on after Atlanta fired Terry Fontenot and joined John Eric Sullivan in Miami as his assistant GM. You look at his history in the NFL, like I mentioned, starting with Washington, was a scouting intern, then scout, all the way until 2016, became the director of college personnel, and then VP of player personnel in his final years in Washington. Had that same role in Atlanta in 2021 and 2022, and then was the assistant GM for 3 straight years in 23, 24, and 25. Oversaw the selections of Michael Penix in 2024, Bijan Robinson in 2023, and the moves of James Pierce and Jalen Walker in 2025. How much influence he actually had there, I don't know, but he was definitely a part of that process. And one thing here with Kyle Smith, this was one of the first moves John Eric Sullivan made. It took about, 4 or 5 days, a week after Sully was named new Dolphins GM to ultimately bring Kyle Smith as assistant GM. They obviously figured out who the head coach would be first. They hired Jeff Hafley, and then 3-4 days after that is when they bring in Kyle Smith as assistant GM. And Sully talked about Smith, saying this is someone that he really wanted to bring with him to this Miami Dolphins front office because of their relationship through various NFL kind of meetings and relationships, but also the way they view building out an NFL roster. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks. Get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5 over on Prize Picks. You can get in on the action, whether it is for the major golf tournament this weekend, whether it's the NBA playoffs. You can play any way you want. I have many different entries for the golf tournament this weekend. Now, you can do team picks. It's a little bit different than daily fantasy. And team picks, you can pick how people finish in the tournament. I've got 2. I've got Sahith Theegala finishing in the top 40. I got also Michael Thorbornson, top 40 finish. Think both of those guys finished top 40. I also have a daily fantasy lineup for the first round. Less on Matthew McCarty, 70.5 strokes. Really good putter, plays Donald Ross courses well. I think he shoots even par or better. Ricky Fowler, hot, on the rise here. Sexy pick, 12 pars. Think he fires off a 3 under, 12 pars, 3 birdies. Might actually have 15 pars, to be honest. Less on Rory McIlroy, 60.5 strokes. I think he wins the tournament. I think he starts off with at least 2 under in round 1. You can take some of these picks on the daily fantasy platform. You can take finishing positions on team picks. There's so many different ways you can play Prize Picks. Get started today. Right now, get $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. That is code HMA when you use that. That is HMA to get $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Shout out to Prize Picks. Getting back to Kyle Smith, I'd be pretty bummed if he ultimately left Miami already to join the Minnesota Vikings as their GM. I like the way Smith and Sully work together. He's part of this new brain trust. When you think of, all right, who is running the Miami Dolphins, who is making all the personnel decisions and putting their plan on the field, it is Sully, Hafley, Kyle Smith. And I want to keep those 3 together as much as possible because I like what they've done so far in free agency and the draft. And you see how similar Smith and Sully think in terms of their drafting philosophy. This was an interview with Travis Wingfield after he got the assistant GM job on his drafting philosophy. Keep things simple. Take good football players. I know that sounds like an obvious statement, but there's a lot of information that goes into it. We're a best player available team, and that's how we'll operate. Well, Miami clearly did that this year. Just go through the draft picks that Miami made. Kane Proctor might be one that you say, okay, that doesn't fit that mold. Really good player, good prospect, but certainly a lot of unknown with Proctor at the next level. But Chris Johnson, good smart football player. Jacob Rodriguez, good football player. Chris Bell, good football player. Kyle Lewis, good football player. Trey Moore, good football player. So, you see how they put their plan into action. And I want to keep Kyle Smith in Miami as long as possible. There are a lot of intriguing candidates that have interviewed with the Vikings, talking with Patrick Seatman, the host of Vikings Now. These are the 10 names to keep an eye on. Kyle Smith joins this list, but you've got John McKay, who interviewed for the Dolphins GM job. Same thing could be said about Chad Alexander, RJ Gillen. Now, speaking with some sources around the league, it does sound like Kyle Smith was more of a exploratory interview and not really someone who has a chance to get the job. They just want to get to know one of the more rising front office members of the NFL. I've been told it's between interim GM Rob Brzezinski and Rams assistant GM John McKay. So I don't know if there's a ton of worry here about Kyle Smith leaving, which is really good in my opinion. But you guys can predict it. Does Kyle Smith leave Miami and get the Vikings GM job before even the Dolphins play a game with him as assistant GM in Miami? I'm going to say no, but let me know your predictions down in the comment section. Rounding out today's show, international schedule for 2026 was announced. You see a lot of games here. You see a lot of different teams playing overseas. The Niners play a couple times in Mexico City. They play in Melbourne, Australia. You see the league returning to Madrid. That is Atlanta and Cincinnati. That is where Miami played Washington last year. But you do not see the Dolphins on this list. And that is a bit of a shocker. If you actually remember, back in January or February, I forget when it was long rumored that the Dolphins and 49ers would actually be playing in Mexico City. That's not the case. As you see, San Francisco is playing someone else. So Miami, I wonder if this changed based off the NFL looking at the Dolphins and saying, all right, this projects to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. We do not want to put them on the national stage. And that is why I'll make the point here with the schedule release just 24 hours away that I don't expect a lot of primetime games for the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins have tied with the Arizona Cardinals in lowest win total projection, 4.5. They have the second hardest schedule in the NFL if you weight the opposing team's win total projection from Vegas. You look at the 2026 opponents for Miami, we'll obviously have the schedule of when it's going to be played where officially tomorrow, but there are a lot of tough games here for the Miami Dolphins. And if you're starting to say, like, okay, you're not playing San Francisco and Mexico City, so you have to play them on the road in the Bay Area, well, is there a chance Miami gets a primetime game at all? Because there's teams that don't. Last year, the number one overall pick, Cam Ward, the Tennessee Titans, they didn't get a single primetime game. So it's certainly possible Miami doesn't get one. It's not guaranteed that every team is playing on the national stage. Now, I do think the Dolphins will get one primetime game. It's not guaranteed, but I think they'll get one. They'll want to showcase Malik Willis. They'll want to showcase this new Dolphins regime. Miami is a big market. It's not a small market like Tennessee or Cleveland, which is why maybe they don't get primetime games. My one prediction of what the primetime game will be, we'll see if I'm right or wrong. I don't know any sources on this, is that it is going to be when the Dolphins return to Green Bay. I think the NFL will want to take advantage of Malik Willis, Jeff Hafley, John Eric Sullivan, Green Bay South going to Lambeau Field again. I'm going to guess that game is a Monday Night Football game. That's my prediction. One primetime game for Miami in 2026. It's Miami in Green Bay on Monday Night Football. If they don't get that game as a primetime game, I could see them also having one primetime game on Thursday Night Football against the Patriots, Jets, or Bills. We know they like to have those divisional Thursday Night Football games at times between not so great teams. All right, hit that sub button because we will have the full Dolphin schedule released on the channel tomorrow afternoon. So stay on the lookout and turn on notifications so you don't miss when we release the schedule.